Welcome to our day 5 of the Pollinator Power Party. If you've been with us this week, you'll know day 1 was our keynote lecture. Day 2 was gardening, culture, and equity. Then we had Be My Honey with honey tasting. Yesterday was lovely Lepidoptera, and we barely kept it on the rails yesterday before we closed. And today is Mythbusters Friday. We've been waiting all week for Mythbusters Friday. You guys have been sending in your myths, and the chat has been blowing up on our live event all week. So thank you for joining the party. Just a couple reminders. We're posting all of the days on YouTube, and we're trying to reach 2.5 million people around the Pollinator Party and for National Pollinator Week. And you guys can help. Post. The main thing you can do is post to our hashtag #PowerMPollinators and get large organizations to do the same thing. Don't forget to share your art and photos and any music or gardening tips or anything like that on our hashtag as well. And a couple reminders is our art contest is open until July 3rd. So if you've been inspired and you are an artist, or even if you're not and you just want to give it a crack, think about submitting something to our art contest. And then that'll be, if you're selected, it's a cash award. You get cash, you get real money, $100 or $200 for the art contest. Our party packs are still shipping. You guys have blown the registration off the charts this year. And so we reordered materials for our party packs, and those are still shipping out. Okay, prizes. So who won yesterday? Yesterday, our prize winners are Fiona Caldwell-King and Tatiana Lerma. Congratulations. You guys won the Wing of Life poster. We'll ship that out to you. Good job. And then if you're still hoping for the grand prizes, which are pretty awesome, we have, just as a reminder, we will send a signed copy of this book, Gardening for Butterflies, to you from Xerces Society. We also have an added prize during the week of a copy of the Sustainable Electricity book. It's a book that I've done. It's on Amazon, signed copy. And then also Doug Tallamy's book, Nature's Home. So hang in there. We have about 400 people that are holding steady, coming every day. And there's going to be some prize winners that we will announce early next week. And let's see, I think, and there's going to be some polling questions. So if you're on the live event, there's 3 questions in the poll. You can go in there as you've been doing all week. You guys are awesome poll takers. So go and have a look at those, and we're going to have a look at how you guys answered those polling questions right as we come into the Mythbusters. All right. We're going to open with dispatches from Sacramento Municipal Utility District and Con Ed. So let's get this party started.
Hello, I'm Jessica Fox with the Electric Power Research Institute.
And I am Kelly Rourke.
I thought you were gonna. Okay, okay, let's try it. Okay, so you don't have to stop, okay?
About pollinators?
We're going to pump you up with pollinators?
With? With?
I don't know. Okay, we gotta do it again. That was
That's
good. One
good.
more. Okay.
You look at me like,
oh my God.
ready? We're gonna pump you up about pollinators.
That was good.
Yeah.
High five.
Yeah, we nailed it.
Today's obscure pollinator is the Cape elephant shrew, Elephantulus edwardii. Did you know that not all pollinators have wings? It's rare, but one such non-flying mammal pollinator is the Cape elephant shrew, and it's maybe the cutest pollinator out there. These little creatures are neither elephants nor shrews, but actually belong to the order Macrocylidea, which includes aardvarks, tenrecs, golden moles, hyracoids, sirenians, and elephants. Elephant shrews are endemic to South Africa, where they're found to pollinate many native plants, such as the pagoda lily and other members of the Masonia genus. They can use their extremely long tongues to lick to the nectar found deep in flowers, which then dust their trunk-like noses with pollen to be brought to other flowers. Elephant shrews also love to snack on invertebrates, such as ants, termites, millipedes, beetles, spiders, and earthworms, so they play an important role in controlling insect populations. With little known about their pollination, there's much to be discovered about these creatures' important role in the ecosystem.
At SMUD, promoting flourishing habitats for pollinators is an important part of creating a sustainable, clean energy future. It goes hand in hand with working to improve the overall health of our community through eliminating carbon emissions from our power supply by 2030, the most ambitious carbon reduction goal of any large utility in the United States. At a local Earth Day event in April, with the help of some AmeriCorps Civic Spark Fellows, we launched a pilot native shrub giveaway. We gave attendees free, native, pollinator-friendly shrubs to plant in their yards and create more pollinator-friendly habitats. Through this effort, we shared the importance of protecting pollinators and providing essential habitats for them with native plants. Recently, we partnered with Sacramento County's Pollinator Partnership and other stakeholders to research which management best practices promoted the most sustainable habitat for pollinators on the American River Parkway's rights-of-way. This project included an educational pollinator demonstration garden for public visitors. Today, we're monitoring the garden and considering new ways to restore and sustainably maintain pollinator habitats on the parkway. We're also partnering with the Wild Energy Lab at UC Davis to conduct research at our 160-megawatt Rancho Seco solar project to learn which pollinator-friendly species grow the best under and in between solar panels. In the future, we'll be able to increase healthy pollinator habitats on many more of our utility-scale resource sites. SMUD understands how important biodiversity and pollinators are to healthy and sustainable eco and food systems. We envision a future where utilities around the world can provide an interconnected refuge for creatures that supply these essential services. Learn more about what we're doing to preserve pollinators and power a clean energy future at smud.org/pollinators.
A musical trio led a group of bee enthusiasts down a path in an urban farm on Governor's Island, an island in the New York Bay, just south of Manhattan. They performed a waggle dance, which mimics the movements honeybees make when communicating with each other. It's part of a day-long event supported by Con Edison, the utility in New York City and Westchester County, aimed to protect bees and their habitat through education, advocacy, research, and food justice programs.
It's important that the Bee Conservancy is around these days because bees are in crisis. Many ecosystems depend upon their survival. There are 20,000 species of bees on this planet, and bees not only pollinate 1 in 3 bites of food that we eat, but also 80% of the world's flowering plants.
We rely on those bees for so much of our food and for environmental resilience. They pollinate about 50% of our wildflowers, which is completely dependent on bee population. So we're excited to be sponsored by organizations like Zarbees, which realize that it's important to connect with consumers that are more and more interested in what companies are doing to support their communities and the environment.
A day-long list of family activities, including live hive inspections. We have seed bomb making stations, farm tours, arts and crafts, face painting. It goes on and on and on. We're actually opening up one of our honeybee hives, showing frames of activity to the audience that's here. By showing people the process of how honeybees make honey, we hope to kind of connect the dots between something that's sort of abstract and how it impacts people on a daily basis, whether it's through the honey that they eat every day or the plants in their yard that have been pollinated.
That's why Con Edison is proud to sponsor this year's Pollinator Power Party.
So it's really important right now for us to do everything we can as a community to make sure our bees are safe and thriving.
They bring pollen to other plants. So then we could have like fruit to eat.
Mine is probably butterflies because I like the designs that they have and different colors.
I learned that some like butterflies, monarch, are getting extinct kind of, and that's gonna like bring down the population of them. Pretty bad and sad.
Same. They make they're so pertinent because like they make honey, and then imagine all the stuff that they make, like nectar, pollen, and honey, all the stuff they make. Then they will, the stuff that was honey inside, it won't exist because we need honey to make the food.
I learned that many of the pollinators, some of the bees, most of the bees don't really sting you, and just the bumblebee stings, or the honeybee, I think. But they're not that dangerous, and they're pretty friendly pollinators.
All right. So we love hearing from those kids, right? That was actually a classroom that I had taught at a few months ago down in Los Angeles. That was an underserved school in Los Angeles, and went and taught a class. And then the kids all wanted to be on camera and tell us their comments. Okay, so let's look at the polls. So there's 3 polling questions to kind of get us warmed up and started here today. The first one is, these are simple, true, false, no idea. Of all bee species, only the honeybee stings. True, false, no idea. Okay, 85% said false. I'm not even going to comment on these. We're gonna kick it over to the scientists on our panel today, and we can kind of reflect on these. I'm sure we will come back to this question about bees and stinging and all of that. This is always a big topic of discussion. Okay, awesome. Okay, next question. Bats are blind. Are bats blind? True, false, no idea. Well, they have the echolocation, right? I don't know. Are bats blind? Gosh, well, we have a bat expert on today. That's a good one. Most people said false, so we got 81% false. Okay, and these are live, so when you're answering the questions, it's dynamically changing, so you can really see your own impact on these answers. Okay, butterfly, next, that's great. We'll go to the next one. Butterflies and moths are pretty, but they don't really help with pollination. True, false, or no idea? Ooh, this is a touchy one. Were you on Lepidoptera yesterday? Butterflies and moths. That was a big discussion. All right, most people are saying false. Okay, those are our 3 questions. Okay, let's get to it. The whole rest of the session today is live. This is a full live stream. So let's switch to introduce our panel. So we have 3 panelists today, and I know the screen is going to switch over here. Here we go. All right, 3 experts today. Okay, Mace Vaughn is co-director, pollinator conservation and agricultural biodiversity at Xerces Society for Invertebrate Protection from Xerces. Mace, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, and then Dr. Vicky Wojcik, did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Director of Science with Pollinator Partnership. Vicky, welcome. And Kristen Lear. I don't know, you guys might remember Kristen. She was part of our party last year, and we had a whole bat day. So we had a bat day with another expert from Bat Conservation International and just some bat bosses. These bat bosses getting it done. Okay, so Kristen is Agave Restoration Program Manager with Bat Conservation International. Welcome, Kristen.
Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. All right. So let's just start with one of these basic questions that was in the polling. So what's the deal with bees stinging. Do all bees sting? Is it only the Apis mellifera? Do they have barbed stingers? What is the deal with this?
Who wants to take it first?
I mean, there's so much here. Well, I'm going to say quickly, you guys were very, very astute. More than just honeybees can sting, but that doesn't mean actually that all bees can sting. And there are even some honey producing bees that cannot sting, and they are not surprisingly called stingless bees.
In fact, we've got, like, as one example too, there's a group of bees called mining bees, of which there's a big colony across the street from my house here in Portland, Oregon. And the kids there call these bees a nest in the schoolyard. They're called the tickle bees. They come up out of the ground. They're solitary bees. They have a stinger, but they are unable to sting. So the kids end up grabbing them and playing with them and goofing around. All bees, all female bees and female wasps, they all have stingers, but not all of them can sting or will sting.
Okay, so is that implying that male bees do not have stingers, Mace?
Correct. That's right. So the sting on a bee or a wasp is actually a modified egg-laying device. If you go way back in time, and there are a lot of wasps that do have we call them an ovipositor. So it's how they would lay eggs, maybe, wherever they're going to lay their eggs. That's a whole collection of its own stories. But for a lot of our bees and wasps, they've evolved into this super sharp structure that they can use to protect themselves.
So okay, so one of the kids at an earlier day, they were lamenting that when bees sting, it rips out their entire gut system. What's the deal with the barbed stinger and all that? What's going on with that, Vicky?
Well, I mean, that's it's true for some bees. So honeybees in particular have a barbed stinger. It helps the stinger stay in. And while it seems a little maybe not the right way to do it, you sting and your insides get ripped out. What it actually does is it allows the bee to fly away. That bee will unfortunately die. But the part of the insides that gets ripped out and stays with the stinger is the venom sac that continues to pump venom into the wound. So it's an adaptation to have a very effective and lasting sting.
Well, okay, so that venom is I've read stories, and there's some posted on some crazy like TikTok channels and stuff like that. There's some crazy stuff on TikTok about pollinators. Golly. So this deal about venom and stinging being medicinal, is that legit? Like if you go in a room and you just let these bees and it's like some kind of medicinal thing, like get me stung and it's going to help me my arthritis and stuff. Is that true?
This has been talked about for a long time. And full disclosure, I used to have really bad knees, and I was a beekeeper back in the day, and I would sting my knees every so often. Does it help? I mean, there's a whole industry of venom extraction. And some crazy stories around, like when you extract venom, you create this huge release of alarm pheromone from honeybees, and it can make a lot of honeybees really fired up. But I don't know, and Vicky, maybe you do. I have not seen really good consistent evidence that the inflammation that comes about, actually there's no air quotes there, the inflammation that comes about when you get stung, that somehow this helps override the inflammation that would come about from something like arthritis. I've not seen good evidence on that, but I also haven't spent a lot of time looking into that literature. And I don't know, Vicky, if you...
and same here. I mean, I definitely have seen it. And I know there's a lot of cosmetic products that do use venom in it. Is that marketing or is it effective? Well, I think, if in the short term you're looking to like plump your lips, maybe, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's going to
be swollen. I mean, if you get stung, so you're like, oh, my lips are bigger. That's better than like Botox or whatever that is.
When you say bigger, we're talking a lot bigger.
Yeah, if you've ever seen anyone get stung in the lip, that's not a good look.
Oh man. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the myth buster is, so let's clarify these myth busters about stinging and venom and all that. So myth buster is that that there are bees that don't sting. The ones, when we think about bee stinging, we tend to think about the honeybee, which is sort of a common place for brains to go when they think about bees. They tend to go first to honeybee, and then if we push, they might start thinking about bumblebees or something like that, right?
Yep.
Is it also correct that most wild bees, they may have stingers, but they don't sting or it doesn't hurt?
I don't think you could say, I don't know if you could say that most wild bees wouldn't sting you. For example, I mean, many of them won't. You know, the mason bees really, they don't tend to, it's really hard, very hard to get stung by a mason bee. I've heard one story of somebody trying to sniff one and somebody's thin skin on their nose, they stung that, you know, barely, like a little poke. Some of these mining bees, no, but you know, you pick up a sweat bee, or if you get a sweat bee on your arm and kind of close it, it'll give you a little sting. Or if you're like me and you kind of are poking around at a leaf cutter bee on a flower, I mean, it'll sting you. Bumblebees will sting. But what you can say for sure is that you either have to physically harass a bee to get stung, like literally be grabbing it or poking it, or with a bee like a honeybee and maybe a bumblebee that has a big colony where they get big enough that they can protect the baby bees and the food and the eggs and all of that that's inside that colony. If you're right at that entrance and are kind of poking around, yeah, they're going to probably want to defend that. But otherwise, you got to work to get stung. Like you've got to get it inside of your clothes or grab onto it or something. Even for those ones that could sting.
And another thing about stinging and venom in general is that it's really metabolically expensive, or another way to say that, really calorie intensive to make venom. And so when you sting, you're using a lot of energy. And if you've just spent your whole day collecting pollen and nectar, you'd rather save that energy for flying than really get tired stinging. So just like May said, all these wild bees are really only going to sting you if they think it's their absolute last resort.
Exactly.
And so then, with the bees that do not have the barbed stingers, can they sting and it doesn't kill them?
Oh yeah.
Yes, and they can sting you more than once if they so should choose.
Yeah. I was helping a friend move a bumblebee colony once, and let me tell you, you get a bumblebee worker, she'll just boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Yes.
So with the thing about the guts ripping out and all of that, that's really specific to the honeybee with the barb stinger. Yeah.
That's right. In fact, I don't think any other, like that barb stinger, and the barb is of course what helps it hold on. Like if it stings through the skin, the barb holds onto it so it can't come out. I'm pretty sure that that's unique just to the honeybees. You know, there are several species of honeybees around the world, and I'm pretty sure that's unique only to them. Wasps, bumblebees, they all have, you know, other bees, very smooth stingers.
And just as a reminder, the honeybee is not native to North America. It was brought over from Europe. So it's actually not a native, it's not, would you guys say it's naturalized to the North America at this point, but not native? It's not invasive? Is that true?
I would say naturalized.
Yeah, it's a good question. It definitely is naturalized. There's also some, I guess maybe, disagreement on how abundant what truly wild naturalized honeybee populations are, because if they did swarm from managed hives and they're feral now, they very often would have varroa mite infections or infestations, I should say. And if they're not treated, they can be quite detrimental to the colony survival. So the feral populations of honeybees are not very large by any means. With rare exception, there's a few unusual colonies, including in upstate New York, that somehow managed to be varroa free, and people love studying them to find out how did they do this.
Yeah, we talked about varroa mite and the colony collapse disorder on Wednesday this week as part of the party. All right, so Kristen.
Yes.
Bats. What's the deal with bats? Do they have teeth? Are they coming to bite us? We're talking about stinging and, you know, all that. So are bats, they're going to come suck my blood at night? Unless I
Nope.
hang some lavender in my room or what?
Some garlic or whatever for the
Oh,
vampires.
garlic. Yeah, that's what I meant. I said garlic. Yep.
I wish it was lavender. That smells a lot better than garlic. So yeah, they do have teeth. They're animals just like our cats, dogs. They have teeth, but they do not attack people. They're not out looking for people. I've worked with bats for over 10 years now. Been in their roosts with 40,000 bats swarming around in the cave. And they don't attack. If there's something in their roost, they'll hide. They'll fly out. They don't attack. And so yeah, they're just like any wild animal. They do have teeth, but they're not out to get you. And we actually don't have any of the 3 vampire bat species that exist in the world.
Oh, wow, there
They're
really
not
are
in the US.
vampire bats? That's a
There
real thing.
are.
Oh my gosh.
It
That's
is a
why
real
I'm
thing. Yep,
figuring out
they're
that
pretty cool.
pirates are real too.
Yeah,
Pirates are
well,
really
they're pretty awesome. I actually got to catch and hold a vampire bat when I was in Mexico, and they're pretty darn neat. They can actually like run on the ground, and anyway, they're really neat. But we don't have any here in the U.S. They're Mexico, Central, and South America.
What does that mean to be a vampire bat? Do they suck blood of mammals?
They eat blood. They don't suck blood. So it's not like the movies where the bats are like latching onto the neck and sucking. What they do is they make a little cut, usually in the foot of an animal like a cow, or a bird while it's sleeping, and then the blood flows from the cut, and they lap up the blood like a cat laps up milk. So it's not the kind of scary
Oh my
suck and
gosh.
dry type thing. Yeah. But anyway, they're cool. They're not pollinators, but they are some of my favorite bats.
Okay, so let's clarify this. So I thought that bats, some species of bats have a proboscis, and they suck. The proboscis, right, is the long tongue. It's like a straw tongue that butterflies and hummingbirds and others use to suck up nectar, right? So I thought
Right.
bats have a proboscis, but you just said they have teeth. So how's that? Are they having both?
So that's a great question. They have tongues, just like our tongue. It's not hollow. It's not like a proboscis. They have these tongues, but some of these nectar feeding bats can have tongues 1.5 times their body length, which is pretty insane. It'd be like us having like a 9-foot tongue. Yeah, and people like how do you fly around with that as a bat? They actually have like a special cavity in their chest where it kind of like curls up and stores when they're not using it. So in a way, it looks like a proboscis because it's so long, but it's just a normal tongue like ours.
Okay.
Really cool. But,
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see. So getting a question from Sarah S. How do the scientists predict the changes in our environment that affect pollinating insects in the near future? Ooh, wow. We have an educated audience here.
Yeah, no doubt. That's an in-depth question for sure. There are actually a number of studies around a couple of key areas around urban landscapes where there's urban heat island effects, and so people have been looking there to see what happens to bee or how bee communities have moved or changed over time. And there are a lot of studies, or a growing number of studies, looking at changes in plant communities as we deal with climate change, and then also especially around bumblebees. There are a lot of there are some studies out there looking at bumblebees, and are bumblebees shifting their ranges in relationship to climate change? And they are. I mean, there's evidence showing that certain bumblebee species are shifting north or moving, as basically, you get more or less rainfall, higher temperatures, more variability. It's definitely having an impact. And there's a lot of that depends on good long-term studies of, say, bees and their distribution, and then tracking those consistently through time. It's one of the reasons why we need to have things like a strong, say, bee monitoring network, so we can, again, understand what these potential impacts of climate change are and other things as well.
Yeah, and another way I can think that you could worry about the impacts that changing landscape and a changing climate can have on insects in particular is this concept called phenological mismatch, which is very real and very troubling when you think about what happens as climate change progresses. So to simplify that concept, for the most part, when plants do things like they start to germinate or grow or bloom and produce flowers, they're triggered to do that by how much sunlight they get. But the opposite is true for insects. Most insects are triggered to do what they do, grow, move from egg to larva to adult to pupa, all of those by temperature. So as climate change progresses, well, if we go back in time before climate change, you had millions of years having the same temperature and day length on a certain day. But as climate change progresses, the average temperature is changing. Day length kind of staying the same for the moment. I joke sometimes we haven't figured out how to mess up how we spin around the sun quite yet. So for the moment, day length stays the same. Yeah, so if it dissociates, which there is data on that, that can be really troubling. And a recent study that came out showed that the average dissociation is about 2 days between plant pollinator emergence and plant bloom. 2 days doesn't make me that edgy. However, in the average, there's high and lows. And there are some dissociations in that study that show up to 10 days mismatch. That's huge for a bee that lives on average 40 days. That's 25% of your life shifted. So that's really troubling. And I guess if you want to buffer against those negative impacts, we really need to maintain diversity in systems in floral communities and insect communities so that there's a lot of backup in all those species. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to tack onto that too, if I can, with bats, because we actually have 3 pollinating bat species here in the U.S. That are found in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And they are experiencing those shifts also with that phenological mismatch with their food plants. So these nectar bats are eating agave nectar from those agaves that we use to make tequila and mezcal, and also saguaro cacti, columnar cacti in Arizona, and we're seeing shifts in some areas of the timing of the bloom of those agaves and cacti species, and also the number of plants that flower in a given year. If they don't get enough good rain, they'll wait to flower, and they'll hold off to the next year. And these bats are migratory. The 3 species we have here, they actually migrate up from central Mexico all the way up to the US Southwest every year. And it's the pregnant females making this migration. They're making a 700-mile migration while pregnant. And so, they really need the nectar of these agaves and cacti. And if with climate change, things are shifting, ranges are shifting, yeah, it's a complicated issue for sure.
Okay, so one of the concerns is sort of this mismatch of timing between the reproductive cycle of your invertebrates or in bats. Those are mammals. So when you're talking about pregnant bats, these are mammals. They nurse and they have pups and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a mismatch between the reproductive cycle and when their food and sometimes even their nesting and so forth resources are available to them, right? And that's sort of being pushed a little bit harder due to climate change and changing water and drought conditions too. It changes, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so a question is thinking about availability of nectar, resources, and pollen. Once somebody goes and visits a flower and they drink all the nectar, is that just done? The nectar's done, or does it rejuice overnight, or like what happens with this deal between nectar? Like I know with bats, there's like one big bloom that the agave can have, right? And then that's it, and the plant's done. That's it.
Right.
But with all these other flowers and everything, what do you guys think about how many times can a flower rejuice?
It's a question with many answers, right? So with all the diversity of flowers out there, there's a lot of answers to this question. And there certainly are flowers that have a one and done, here's my showy moment, please come visit and pollinate me now. But most flowers recharge during their bloom period. In a 24-hour period, they'll recharge their nectar. But nectar is still limited in the day. So the pollinator that shows up first has first shot at it. And you absolutely can have an empty flower after quite a few pollinators have visited it.
And this is where you had suggested too, like with going back to the climate change question, when you've got drier conditions, those flowers have a harder time producing abundant nectar. And so you'll have on dry years, you'll have, less nectar produced. They usually still produce some, but you can have a nice, when you've got good moisture and a good combination of moist soils and nice sunny days, all together, they can really crank it out. I would say too, and I think you suggested this, Vicki, but sometimes for certain flowers, there are patterns on when that nectar might be released. And as bee scientists, it's important to keep that in mind or understand, because you may go out at 11 o'clock in the morning and think a flower, maybe it's tarweed or something, like, oh, there's nothing visiting this plant. Whereas if you'd shown up at 7 o'clock in the morning, just as on a nice warm day was just getting started, all of a sudden you'd see a lot of bees and butterflies visiting. And it may just be because it, bundled up all that nectar, presented it first thing in the day, and then it was gone.
Yeah, no, bee watching is definitely an early riser sport, that's for sure.
That's why I work with bats. Night owl.
Yeah, and some. I was gonna just share too. When I go out and I'm watching for bees or doing observations or something like that. A trick sometimes is I'll go out early in the morning and put cups over certain flowers. And then, the bumblebees have sort of a longer foraging period than some other species. They can fly when it's a little colder than some other bee species. So they get up a little earlier, start earlier, and then they can go later in the day too. But sometimes I'll put cups over certain flowers and then let everything come out and forage butterflies. And then I'll remove the cups and just see, it kind of keeps them going, it expands their foraging period a little bit. So then I can be out there observing a little bit longer.
That sounds fun. I'm down with that. So you can help them work around your schedule a little bit. I think that's
yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So, a question from earlier this week. Oh, this is a big one in the chat on Monday this week. Are wasps or mosquitoes pollinators?
Oh yeah, that's solid. And
they are. I know people don't like hearing that mosquitoes can pollinate because it kind of upsets you. Like, oh gosh, I thought they were all bad. But there are not all species of mosquitoes, but mosquitoes do pollinate. And it's not one of these unusual systems that's only in tropical landscapes. Actually, in northern wetland systems, so throughout North America, in wetlands, mosquitoes are really good pollinators of flowers. And in particular, some really tiny, you wouldn't even think they're orchids, but some really tiny orchids. Imagine the size of a mosquito. It pollinates a flower similarly small.
Okay, that was a big debate earlier this week. So let's talk about this just a little bit more. So wasps are carnivorous.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
And so do wasps have teeth?
Yeah, I like that. They're like little bats.
That'd be funny.
I don't know. Do wasps have teeth? I mean, so it seems like because they go around and they eat all these little midges and everything and aphids and stuff, right? So do they have teeth?
They don't have teeth, but they've got pretty strong mandibles. So they've got jaws, like all this. So they've got a nice sort of set of jaws, and they're going to use those in their legs to grab, chew. They'll sting their prey. If it's let's like we're thinking about something like a yellow jacket, like super common. Like when you think wasp, you usually think of something like a yellow jacket. So they feed their young meat, and it's usually, especially early in the summer, it's usually going to be little caterpillars, aphids, little soft-bodied insects that they can find. Some of them are, will also eat dead things like the ham sandwich on your picnic or your turkey or your salmon. That's more often the case later in the season when a lot of the small prey have disappeared. But they're only taking that back to feed to their babies. The adults, though, that when they're out there going to gather that, they need to keep fueling themselves. And for that reason, they don't visit flowers for pollen, which is what bees, do so significantly. but they do visit flowers for nectar, which is like a little energy drink. So they're getting their Gatorade or their whatever, their energy drink to keep going. That's where they get the sugar they need to keep themselves all fired up, and then they collect meat to feed to the babies.
So all right, so bees are vegetarian, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, people joke they're vegetarian wasps.
Yeah, that's like, we commonly say that. Although if you want to be like really scientifically accurate, they have a plant-based protein source rather than an animal-based protein source that they feed their developing larvae. Yeah.
Which is pollen. They're
Pollen, yeah,
plant-based.
pollen's an excellent plant-based protein source.
Well, but doesn't that mean they're vegetarian? A plant-based.
Oh, I guess it is. It does. Yeah. I was just being very picky about syntax.
Oh, got you. Because you're a scientist. Yes, got it. Okay, awesome. Okay, all right. So mosquitoes and wasps are pollinators. What about Diptera? Oh God, do you love Diptera? No, it's a housefly. Right, the housefly. Good griefers. I can't. The houseflies just drive me crazy. And is it true on the housefly that they like that? I'm just gonna go a little edgy here. They like barf onto the plant, onto your food, and then they suck it back up after the enzymes like broke it down a little bit. So they're actually barfing. So when I was a kid, I would be at camp, right?
Yeah.
And the counselors would be like, "Don't let the flies land on your food because they're barfing on it." And the kids, including me, was like, "Oh my God, the flies are barfing. I can't eat my lunch."
Vicky, can we? Now, I feel I should know the answer to this for sure, but here's so first of all, when those flies land on your food, they're actually tasting it because they actually can taste with their feet. So that's one cooler thing. Like they're landing and kind of tasting whatever is going on. And by the time you've got one of those flies that's an adult, they've done all the feeding. They're like, the same thing happens with silk moths if my memory serves, in that silk moths don't go to flowers. They get all the food they need. They get all the fat and protein, et cetera, when they're caterpillars. And then when they're adults, they're just looking to find mates, and that's their main job. Flies, those green bottle flies and those house flies, I think are the same. They've done all their growing, all their eating as larvae, and now they're just looking mostly for water, just so they can keep themselves going, and then looking for places to lay their eggs, for which they are tasting to see if this is like a good dead thing or a good rotting thing or good whatever.
Corn flies, fascinating.
Cool.
I want to Google this.
Mace brought up a really cool thing that we often don't think about because we're big mammals. So when we think about how an animal does something, we're like, well, how do they do it the way we do it? A lot of insects have non-feeding adult stages. They do all their eating when they're developing, and then all the adults are out there to do is mate and lay eggs, and the cycle starts over again. But by non-feeding, we mean also non kind of like making you grow, so non-protein feeding. They still do drink, and flies, and even beautiful, pretty things like butterflies, when they drink, they really prefer not clean water, but water that actually has some minerals in it. So you might see flies and butterflies on what you would look at and say, that's some dirty water that they're drinking, but they're actually getting their electrolytes and nutrients and all of that in there. Yeah, so those flies aren't really puking on your food. But I understand the confusion because there are quite a lot of different flies, but a lot of insects that do not have teeth or mandibles, but do consume a protein source, and they digest it outside of their body. So they absolutely will put some digestive fluids on what they want to eat, and then when it's liquid, they'll drink it.
Spiders, ambush
spiders
bugs.
are like that. Yeah.
They'll totally.
I like your
vomit all
digestive
over it.
juices instead of barf there.
We do not need the demo there, Mace. We get the idea. You don't need to demo the barfing part. That's good. Okay, so
have the fun.
Yeah. So okay, So we actually covered some of this yesterday a little bit, and talked about the differentiation between life stages and some of there's the kind of the growing stage and feeding and all of that, and get your muscles all built up with a bunch of protein. And then you sort of switch over, then the adult stage, you're not eating at all anymore. All you're doing is mating. You have like a 5-day, go to it, mate, get your offspring going, right? Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. And if anybody saw, we had to completely shut down that conversation when they started getting overly reproductive in the discussion. They got censored. Yeah, all the scientists, we had to cut them off. They got censored yesterday. You can go watch that. It's really funny. Okay, next question. Okay, locally harvested honey, does that help with allergies? Let's do some myth busting. I have allergies. Here's what I was told at the health food store. It's not just the honey. You have to get it in the comb. You cut the comb and you chew the comb with the honey in it, and that's how you get. And I did it. I was very dedicated, and I didn't have any benefit from that for allergies.
I think, I mean, the logic of it is that, so first of all, most of your allergies are going to be from airborne pollen. So wind pollinated plants. So those are typically not plants that like people often, when they've talked about like allergies and honey, they're like, oh, the bees are collecting honey from the plants that give me allergies. And they typically don't, right? The ragweed, the pine, the grass, these are all things that are blown in the wind. But they do get out there, and they do get into a hive, and they do get into the wax, and so there's a logic there. But I have not seen any evidence, like data that shows that buying that locally produced honey is going to give you that allergy benefit. It certainly won't hurt, and it tastes good, and you're supporting some local beekeepers, and those are all fantastic reasons to buy that locally produced honey that's minimally processed, because that minimal processing also means you're keeping a lot of the amazing flavor that you're going to have in that honey. Like, there are so many reasons. But unless, Vicki, you know something I don't know.
I don't. I mean, on this one, the theoretically maybe, but I don't think it actually checks out, because I mean, the theory would be that you would be giving yourself really mild doses of these allergens, and that your immune response would then be mitigated. That theory absolutely holds true, and it's used in a lot of other therapies when people have allergies, but it just doesn't make sense, exactly like May said, for the things that are actually making your nose run in the spring. Those pollens are not what the bees are actively collecting, and maybe incidentally land in that honey, but I doubt it has an impact.
Oh, okay, I got that now. Oh, okay, that just clicked for me. I don't know if that clicked for the audience too. So what they're just to emphasize or reiterate is the bees, the flowers, and the type of the pollen that these bees are visiting that go to make the honey is different pollen source than what we typically have that we're allergic to, which is sort of blowing around all over the wind, whereas the pollen that bees are getting is more attached to the stigma. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Like, if you think about it this way, that wind, the pollen from, say, grass is blown on the wind. It's light, it's tiny, it's small.
Right.
Whereas the pollen that bees collect, quite frequently, it's larger pollen. It's got a lot more protein in it, a lot more fat, a lot more nutrients. It's heavier. It just doesn't blow around and therefore get into your head and your sinuses in the way ragweed or pine or grasses do, or oak. That oak pollen is blowing out. It doesn't mean that bees won't collect it, because sometimes they do. But then they're collecting the pollen. There's no nectaries associated with any of those flowers, and so they just be collecting the pollen, and it would go into the pollen stores of the hive as sort of a nutrient poor pollen.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try to hit a couple other questions. So from Lynn, this is from Lynn. Okay, let's try to hit this one. Do caterpillars have teeth? Boy, we got a lot of teeth questions.
Mace, you're answering this one again because you're our entomologist dentist.
Short answer. They're actually kind of like, the answer is similar to the answer with wasps, in that they've got, like, if you look at a caterpillar, they're soft and squishy, except for the head. The head on a caterpillar and the jaws on a caterpillar we call it sclerotized. They are super tough and hard. And so, no, they are not teeth like these, but they are this hard mandible, these hard jaws that will like rip the plant apart, kind of grind it up, and then they've got really powerful digestive juices that really do the hardcore breaking it down. So that's my take on it. No
So
teeth.
is this true? All invertebrates have mandibles, but not teeth? That's not true. Okay, I'm not.
So I think the flip side, no invertebrates have teeth. Teeth are actually a uniquely mammalian thing.
Ah,
Teeth as we
which is
know it. There are some fish that have tooth like shark teeth, like the bony fish do also have teeth, but that's about it.
so which is why bats as mammals, Kristen was saying bats have teeth. So,
Yes. Yep. Bats have teeth just like we do. Yep. Exactly.
Oh, golly jeepers. I don't know. I don't know the bat thing. I mean, I like bats, but now I'm
They're
thinking
awesome.
about them like at night. Okay, so
But
are
that's what
bats
I said. Like, I've seriously been out. I mean, I've been out so much with bats, and I have never once been attacked, even when I've been in their roosts, like where their babies are. Are they don't? They're more skittish than most animals. They're pretty. I don't want to say docile. They will attempt to bite if you like grab them, right? Like self-defense, any wild animal is going to get scared, but never flying around have I ever been or heard of anyone like
so
actually being.
comforting, Kristen. You've never
And
been
they're
attacked.
not blind. Like I know I get that asked a lot, like, are bats blind because they're
Yeah.
flying at night? Nope, they are not blind. That is one of those myths. All bats have eyes, and all bats can see. They actually can see better than us at night. They have better night vision. Some bats, like fruit-eating bats, can see in color also. So yeah, they have eyesight just like us.
So the fruit-eating bats, those may be vegetarian or carnivorous bats. They
So
could do
that's
both.
so that's a really interesting question. So like for the nectar bats that we have in the US here, they're, primarily nectar feeders and they eat pollen too from the plants. But we're actually finding out that those bats, while they are nectar bats, they actually eat a lot more insects than we previously thought. And we don't know if it's more incidental take while they're like on the flowers, if they're just accidentally ingesting insects that are also on the flowers, or if they are actually out hunting for insects. We think they could be actually out actively looking for insects because there are some times when those bats will arrive in places in the US before the flowers are in bloom. Their food resources are actually in bloom. And so, what are they eating in that instance? We think probably more insects. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So we don't know everything about bats right now.
Oh no, it's bat biology is a fairly like young field just because they're so hard to study. Like they're out at night and hard to track. So yeah, we have a lot to learn.
Well, I have bats that come in my backyard like around dusk, like
Yeah.
around the same time as the great horned owl sort of starts to. The
Oh
bats
yeah.
come and they're doing their foraging. Usually, I have I have like a hydroponic system in the back. They like the
cool.
water, and there's little midges
Yep.
over it, so they come and they swoop and eat all these
Awesome.
little bugs, and then the great horned owl comes out like an hour later, right?
Oh yeah. Try to get the bats. Yeah.
Yeah, right,
A little
exactly.
food chain you got going on there.
Okay,
That's
so
awesome.
final question. Let's hit on this one. Like like home boxes, like bat boxes, butterfly boxes, bee boxes. What is the deal with these things that like we go to the garden center and we see it's really cool. I got a bat box in my backyard, never been occupied, and I have that thing set. I followed all the instructions. Yeah, it's so perfect, and the bats have never occupied it. So what's the deal with that?
So that's kind of a good thing a lot of times. If you don't get bats in your bat house, it means there's either not bats around, but in your case there are. But it means that there's natural roost sites already in your area. They already have good habitat to roost in, which is good. Bat houses are great though if there's areas that are being like deforested or need supplemental roosts.
Okay.
And it can take a couple years for the bats to even find your bat house and decide they want to roost there. And they might just be there for a week and then leave.
But
they move around a
Kristen,
bit.
are those the carnivorous bats that go in the bat boxes, or are they the pollinating? Are they both?
Oh, good question. So it's only the insectivorous ones. The nectar feeding ones, at least that we have here in the U.S., do not roost in bat boxes. I do want to put a plug in for bat gardens too, for pollinating insects. If you plant night blooming flowers, you can attract nocturnal insects that our insectivorous bats can eat. So while we don't have pollinating bats in most of the U.S., you can still attract bats to your yard with night blooming flowers. So put that plug in.
Whoa.
Yep.
Wow, that's really
I know.
cool.
I want a bat garden. I know.
I need the list of my native to my watershed unit night blooming BCI's got to do that.
Yeah, we're working on. We have a guide for gardening for bats, so check out the website, and we're working to hopefully get some more like localized native plant lists eventually.
Okay, so all right, so Mace, let's talk about the butterfly boxes, and then I'll have Vicky hit the bee boxes. I'm hitting you on this because I talked to your boss, your head of Xerces Society. He has an opinion about butterfly boxes. I'm just putting you 100% on the spot live stream if you are consistent with your boss or not. What do you say?
They're ridiculous. That's a hard, easy no. If you want a nice little container to maybe have some spiders move into, or maybe have like a little paper wasp or something on the inside, depending on how they make it, that's cool. That's great. But no, I don't know where these even came from. They've showed up like 20, 30 years ago with little slits on a little box.
Yep.
And if you want to create a place for butterflies to hang out, have a nice brush pile in the corner of your backyard, have some organic debris, leave some places that don't get mowed down, like those the overwintering stages of butterflies vary depending on the species, but you want someplace that a big pile of leaves, some shrubs and brushes, some tall grass, where you might have caterpillars go and hunker down in it for the winter, or adult butterflies, which those boxes are supposed to do, find a little spot to hang out down in the rocks, down in the branches, and hide out for the winter and things like that. So hard no.
Hard no, and that is what your boss said. Good job. You keep
I've always been really confused by them too, but good for whoever figured that out and tried to market. I don't know. And with bee houses, it's a really similar answer to the bat box question, where they have to be designed the right way. And actually, I think even the more commercially available ones, more so, are starting to catch on to the right length. Yeah. But if you have really good habitat, especially if your garden's in a natural area, they've got options, and they may or may not choose your bee nests that you set out there. So by all means, put it out there, but don't get disappointed if they don't use it. It's a good sign probably that the rest of your habitat is a great habitat for pollinators.
Awesome. All right. You guys are the bomb. Scientists are where it's at, right? It's a bunch of entomologists and bat people. You're the bomb. If there's any kids watching out there, this is a really cool career to go into. Go to college, go to graduate school, and you'll be on your way. And you can work for any one of these people on the screen. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. That was great.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone.
All right. So now I'm just going to do a quick close. So we have reached the end of our week of the 2022 Pollinator Power Party. And just a few things that came out across the whole week that are consistent. Plant native flowers to your watershed area. Think about reducing use of chemicals and herbicides, particularly in a home garden setting. And we saw yesterday, the chat yesterday from Kevin Broles, that also native plants, when they get established, they need less chemicals too and less water. And I'll just offer another concept here is to evolve our idea of beauty and what beauty is. That your landscape and your native areas may not be the mowed lawn, right? And it's okay to let your native vegetation sort of go dry. My backyard, I'm in California, coming into July, I'm pretty dead out here. We're getting pretty dark, right? So it's kind of evolved the concept of what beauty looks like. And beauty, going out into a garden that changes every day and you never know what's going to be there and it changes every season is beautiful. And it doesn't always look the same and it doesn't always look green, right? So just offering kind of an idea out there. Okay, so wanted to do the shout out for our Power in Pollinator initiative. These are power companies working together to understand pollinators. That is the reason why this party is possible. You can check out all the electric power companies that are in the group on our website. And we're going to let this party kind of simmer for a couple weeks, meaning we're going to let this ride. People rewatch us on YouTube. The views, the posts are super, super helpful. And I think that's a wrap for 2022. We have a short outro video here, and you guys are the bomb. You guys are the bomb. The chat just exploded this year. So let's keep it going. Let's try to hit our 2.5. So if you know anybody at any big organizations, any celebrities, get them to do a post. And hopefully we'll see you back here next year. All right, let's go to the outro.
Thank you so much for joining us for the 2022 Pollinator Power Party. We hope you learned a lot and that you were inspired.
And we hope you had fun. And we had fun.
We did. We had so much fun. This is a great party.
Yeah, and we hope to see you next year at Pollinator Week and the Power Party next year in 2023.
We hope we pumped you up about pollinators.